How does the complex interplay of discipline, humility, and accepting counsel, even from flawed messengers, shape the unfolding narrative and David's journey? Explore the profound significance of heeding discipline and correction into one's journey, discovering how these choices can lead to wisdom and the fullness of life. Joab's challenging yet vital confrontation with David shows that even those with flaws may carry messages of importance. A warm welcome to you again, brothers and sisters. What a joy it is to study the Word of God with you. In the last lesson, King David grapples with a desire to lead his troops into battle against his rebellious son Absalom. He is deeply concerned for Absalom's safety, even though Absalom's actions have led to this conflict. Reluctantly, David allows his forces to go to war. The battle unfolds in the forest of Ephraim, resulting in a significant loss of life among Absalom's supporters. There, we witness the heavy burden of leadership, illustrating the challenging decisions leaders must make for the greater good, often involving personal sacrifices. Absalom's rebellion serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of defying authority and the need to respect and adhere to it. Amidst the turmoil, David's unwavering love for Absalom shines through, underscoring the enduring bond between a parent and a child, even in the face of betrayal. The unexpected twist of Absalom's death in a forest highlights that life's outcomes can be fatal for those who go against God.
Please turn with me to 2 Samuel chapter 19. The news of Absalom's death was a real heartbreak to David. He had a tender love for his son, and he was extremely grieved when his son died. David recognized that trouble had come upon him because of the sin he had committed. God had told him that strife would never depart from his house because of it. That is exactly what happened. And from the time of Absalom's death, I believe David was a broken man. I think part of his grief was due to his disappointment. Though David was a great king, he was a poor father. I am sure David realized this. He never quite succeeded in being the father he should have been, and Absalom was evidence of this failure. David's grief was such that even Joab was disturbed by it and rebuked David for it. 2 Samuel chapter 19, verses 1 and 2. Joab was told, "The king is weeping and mourning for Absalom." And for the whole army, the victory that day was turned into mourning, because on that day the troops heard it said, "The king is grieving for his son." It should have been a great day of victory and a day of rejoicing because the enemy was defeated. For David, however, it was not a victory at all. Instead, it was a time of grief and sorrow beyond expression. Verse 3. The men stole into the city that day as men steal in who are ashamed when they flee from battle. David's army should have been rejoicing because they had won the battle. Instead, they left the battlefield after the victory and retreated to Jerusalem as if they had been defeated. Why? Because Absalom was slain, and it had broken the heart of David. Verse 4. The king covered his face and cried aloud, "O my son, Absalom! O Absalom, my son, my son!" David really loved this boy. What a tender expression this is. David had been such a poor father. He had handled things badly, but he loved his son and was broken by his death. Probably there's regret that he is not able to bring about any good in Absalom's life. There's no way he can change the past. Now Joab was responsible for Absalom's death. I am not sure that David ever really comprehended just how his son died. I am sure that he had heard quite a few stories relating how it occurred. But David probably did not want to pursue it too far. Verses 4 and 5. The king covered his face and cried aloud, O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son. Then Joab went into the house to the king and said, Today you have humiliated all your men who have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. Of course, Joab is pushing the situation to the opposite extreme. But certainly David would have preferred others dying rather than Absalom. That is quite evident. Joab rebukes David because he is so grieved about the death of his son who had become his enemy and would have killed David had he been given the opportunity. Unlike David's pain and sorrow, do you notice the contrasting insensitivity of Joab after he had killed his own cousin, Absalom? Even after having been told by David to deal gently with his son. You can also see that Joab's respect for David is diminishing. Notice, instead of taking orders and abiding by it, you find Joab dictating to the king. Later on, you will see that David warns Solomon of Joab's cruelty. He can be a liability to the family of David. We'll look into Joab later. You will find that he actually deserts the family later on. For now, David takes Joab's advice and acts on it. Verse 8. So the king got up and took his seat in the gateway. When the men were told the king is sitting in the gateway, they all came before him. Meanwhile, the Israelites had fled to their homes. The people needed some rallying point now. Everyone was depressed. It was a sorry state of affairs. The man who had led the rebellion had been slain. But instead of rejoicing, the people witnessed the greatest grief that David ever expressed. However, after Joab talked to the king, David went up to the gate to let his men know that he deeply regarded and appreciated their loyalty to him. Throughout the tribes of Israel, the people were all arguing with each other, saying, The king delivered us from the hand of our enemies. He is the one who rescued us from the hand of the Philistines. But now he has fled the country because of Absalom. And Absalom, whom we appointed to rule over us, has died in battle. So why do you say nothing about bringing the king back? What happened was simply this. There were those who had gone over to Absalom's side, and now that he was dead, they didn't know what to do. They decided that the best thing was to bring the king back. Verse 11. King David sent this message to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests. Ask the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to bring the king back to his palace, since what is being said throughout Israel has reached the king at his quarters? Apparently, even in the tribe of Judah, there had been a great defection to Absalom's side. Now David rebukes them for their action. Verse 12. You are my brothers, my own flesh and blood. So why should you be the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, Are you not my own flesh and blood? May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if from now on you are not the commander of my army in place of Joab. Remember what Joab had done? He had killed Absalom. And I think David knows that if Joab is given too much of importance, he is going to be a liability. And see what he does. He replaces him with Amasa. David's sister's son, Abigail's son, in Joab's place. Though Amasa could have been executed for treason, he's given the highest position in his army. By now, you should have got some insight on Joab's personality. Now, how do you think he would have felt at this stage? He protected David, and now what is David doing to him? He's replacing him with the very person who stood up against him. I'm sure Joab would have been seething with rage by now. He had brought victory for David by taking swift action against Absalom. I don't think he would have been too pleased when he was informed that Amasa would be taking his place. It was a unanimous desire to return David to his throne. Let's read from verses 14 onwards. He won over the hearts of all the men of Judah as though they were one man. They sent word to the king, "Return, you and all your men." Then the king returned and went as far as the Jordan. Now the men of Judah had come to Gilgal to go out and meet the king and bring him across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, hurried down with the men of Judah to meet King David. With him were 1,000 Benjamites along with Ziba, the steward of Saul's household, and his 15 sons and 20 servants. They rushed to the Jordan where the king was. Remember, who was Shimei? Shimei had cursed David when he went out. Now he wants to be the first one to welcome the king back. He knows he would be in trouble if he doesn't come and report to the king and apologizes for what he did. People know how to switch sides to their advantage, right? Shimei is one such person. When David was in trouble, he was the first to throw stones. Now when David is back on the throne, there is Shimei, the first one to welcome him. He better apologize. Verses 18 to 21. They crossed at the ford to take the king's household over and to do whatever he wished. When Shimei, son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell prostrate before the king and said to him, "May my lord not hold me guilty. Do not remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. May the king put it out of his mind. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. But today I have come here as the first of the whole house of Joseph to come down and meet my lord the king." Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said, "Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this? He cursed the Lord's anointed." Shimei is in trouble, especially when Abishai or Joab is around. But David, being very generous and gracious, he chooses to forgive Shimei. Verse 22, David replied, "What do you and I have in common, you sons of Zeruiah? This day you have become my adversaries. Should anyone be put to death in Israel today? Do I not know that today I am king over Israel?" David's revealing his disgust and disapproval of the manner in which the sons of Zeruiah, Joab, and Abishai are acting. You know, they are ever ready to take ruthless and vengeful action. Let's remember, when God is on our side, there's absolutely nothing to fear. It's no point reacting or even overreacting to those who oppose us. Live above those small irritations and serve the Lord. David knew he was king. God had placed him over the whole people of Israel. Who is Shimei? He needn't have to bother. That's the same with us. When God appoints us and ordains us for a specific task, there will be people who will oppose. There will be people who will cast stones. We need to live above them. We've got to forgive and move on. Verse 23, So the king said to Shimei, "You shall not die." And the king promised him on oath. David's final decision concerning Shimei was that he did not intend to punish him. In fact, David did not intend to deal with this man in any way. Verse 24. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also went down to meet the king. He had not taken care of his feet, or trimmed his mustache, or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he returned safely. Mephibosheth, in deep appreciation to David, would not join in the rebellion. He remained loyal to David. And during all this time, he fasted and prayed for the king. It's wonderful to have friends like that, is it not? Verse 25. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, "Why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth?" He said, "My lord the king, since I, your servant, am lame, I said, I will have my donkey saddled and will ride on it, so I can go with the king. But Ziba, my servant, betrayed me, and he has slandered your servant to my lord the king. My lord, the king is like an angel of God, so do whatever pleases you. All my grandfather's descendants deserve nothing but death from my lord the king. But you gave your servant a place among those who sat at your table. So what right do I have to make any more appeals to the king?" Mephibosheth tells David, "If you think I have betrayed you, then do to me as you please. I have no right to ask any other favor of you at all." 29 to 30 now. The king said to him, "Why say more? I order you and Ziba to divide the fields." Mephibosheth said to the king, "Let him take everything now that my lord the king has arrived home safely." This, I feel, proves Mephibosheth's sincerity. He's not really bothered about the lands or the property. Now let's find out another individual. What does he do? Barzillai the Gileadite. Verse 31. Barzillai the Gileadite also came down from Rogelim to cross the Jordan with the king and to send him on his way from there. Now Barzillai was a very old man, 80 years of age. He had provided for the king during his stay in Mahanaim, for he was a very wealthy man. Barzillai the Gileadite was a patriarch from another nation who had been generous to David and had given him sustenance during the rebellion. Now David wanted this man to go back to Jerusalem with him, so he could reward him for his generosity. Verse 33. The king said to Barzillai, "Cross over with me and stay with me in Jerusalem, and I will provide for you." But Barzillai answered the king, "How many more years will I live, that I should go up to Jerusalem with the king?" Barzillai said to David, "I have not many more years. I've had a number of years. I know my days are numbered, and I would just as soon might as well stay home. I appreciate your generous offer of going and living in a palace, but I have reached that age where things like that do not tempt me at all." Verse 35. I am now 80 years old. Can I tell the difference between what is good and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats and drinks? Can I still hear the voices of men and women singers? Why should your servant be an added burden to my lord the king? Barzillai continues, I am an old man. I can't hear the music anymore. Food does not taste like it once did. I don't want to come and mar the party. I don't want to be the one to slow down the king and his enjoyment. Verse 36. Your servant will cross over the Jordan with the king for a short distance. But why should the king reward me in this way? Barzillai helped David because he knew David was God's man. He had confidence in the king. This was his motivation to assist David. It's wonderful to have friends like Barzillai to support when you are in danger. Mephibosheth and Barzillai remain faithful to David. It's wonderful to have friends like that. And I'm sure When you had gone through some trouble, there have been people who have blessed you, who have been generous, who have helped you. They have been shoulders that you could cry on. Well, it would be good for you to reward them, thank them for what they did. Now, in closing, it's too bad that David had not forgiven his son, or at least accepted him when he was alive. Remember when Absalom sinned and came back, and he wanted to see David's face? David refused. It would have probably ended differently. The story might have been different if he had completely forgiven the boy. If he had received him like the father received the prodigal son, by putting his arms around him, placing a robe on him, and calling for a feast, I believe David would have spared himself the awful rebellion which took place. It's a little too late for David to actually mourn like the way he did. He mourned after his son died. Dear people, I'm sure you will agree with me that we can be ever so loving, patient, kind, and gentle to almost everyone except those within the four walls of our own home. Dear friend, let's be gracious with our own family, be Christ-like at home. It will make a world of difference.
This passage, brothers and sisters, emphasizes the importance of heeding discipline and correction in one's life, as it can lead to a path of wisdom and ultimately to life itself. God often uses others to speak into our lives for our benefit, and it highlights the value of humility and wisdom in listening to such counsel. Job's confrontation with David is difficult but necessary words that people may need to hear. Even though Job had committed a grave offense by killing David's son, his words still held weight. David lightly suspected Job's involvement in his son's death, given his knowledge of Job's character. This situation illustrates that sometimes those delivering important messages may themselves be deeply flawed individuals. The passage encourages us to be open to receiving correction and counsel, even from those who may have caused pain. Just as David eventually heeded Job's words, the hope is still that people will be humble enough to accept such messages and apply them to their lives. Proverbs notes that whoever heeds discipline shows the way to life, but whoever ignores correction leads others astray. Proverbs 10:17. Furthermore, the one who heeds correction shows prudence, and it is found in Proverbs 15, verse 5. May God give you a beautiful time ahead. God bless you.